sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that is taking a microscope all the way down there. I'm Christy Powell. My co-host tonight is sliding to the other side of the microphone, our second favorite audio engineer. Welcome, Martin Robert.
Hey everyone, happy to be here.
And our guest tonight is the Swedish scientist with a wild Imaginarium, Dr. Anna Zakrisson.
Yeah, hello. Thank you for letting me be here and talk about my favorite topics.
We are glad to have you tonight. We're going to be jumping into some kind of uncomfortable material for some of us. And I'm going to go ahead and say that most of those people who are uncomfortable need to get comfortable, because this is a topic that we need to be feeling a little bit more casual about. So, Martin, where can folks reach us if they want to call the show tonight?
Yeah, so go ahead and give us a call at 512-991-9242. Or if you need to call in over web, it's tiny.cc/callsex.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive right in. If I can get a little bit of forgiveness on that metaphor. Dr. Anna, those of us who don't menstruate may have a little bit of catching up to do here. So can you walk us through just the very basics of what's going on the chemical side of things as we're having this conversation?
Okay, so let's see if I remember my sort of basic biology class. I have a PhD in biology, but you tend to forget fast. Also, I want to say I don't menstruate either, because I've actually removed all of that from my from my body. But the whole principle of it is basically that you have a buildup of a lot of tissue in the uterus, basically, that would make it very warm and comfy for an egg to a fertilized egg to implant, basically. And at the end of the cycle, you bleed this out. So you have fluctuations of four main hormones during the cycle, and some of them make you feel like grumpy and a little bit sad and maybe a little bit more vulnerable, and other makes you a little bit more horny. So it varies a lot for women.
An eclectic blend.
Yes. Yeah, so that's basically the short summary of it. Other than that, Google it and read up on it, because I think it's kind of important to know.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll go ahead and mention that there are already links in the show notes to this episode where we go into a little bit more of the specifics of all this. But I think it's important to acknowledge with a little bit of scientific understanding and a little bit less of this like cultural uncomfortableness, just the impact that we know these types of massive hormone swings can have on our mood and on our, I guess, just our general somatic experience. Can you describe anything about the particulars of what we've seen demonstrate in laboratories about what these sorts of hormone swings can do to our mood?
I think we can take a look at what happens in just a normal kitchen. I don't think we have to go to the lab.
Sure.
or your average bedroom. Well, there are a subgroup of women that I would like to highlight right now. And these are women who get so bad PMS, like premenstrual syndrome, where you get often like very irritable, you get hungry, you're much more pain sensitive. There's a lot of things like that going on in the body, and sometimes their mental state gets so affected that they actually need psychiatric help for it. And so if you suffer from extreme PMS, I'm not talking about just the pain, but that you actually become literally a different type of person, like your personality changes completely. There is help to get, and you should absolutely contact your doctor, and never have a medical doctor tell you it's completely normal and you should just go home and accept it. That is like, I think that that's just something that's very important about these topics, that when you really suffer from it and when your life actually it's impacted by it, you you are, you are allowed to get help. You can demand help, right? It's like a broken bone or something like else that doesn't function like it should do in the body, that you can get help. And there are some medications as well, that you can get to help you out with that. And also the same with women who bleed a lot. There might be women who bleed so much they get anemic every month, or like people with endometriosis that can bleed 20 days out of 30. And a lot of women are just quiet about it and just bleed and are tired because of anemia, and they're in terrible, terrible, terrible pains, and often told it's painful to be a woman, so just shut your trap and go home, basically. And don't accept that.
Yeah,
It's
well,
just a short form of it.
I definitely.
I got straight into it, right? Being like all angry and stuff.
No, I mean, I think that there is room for anger here. I feel like this is important because I hear you saying that if you're not satisfied, that if your care, if your basic sensation, if your experience of this is too painful, too miserable, then something's wrong, that this is something that you can receive treatment, that you can receive care for. I'm wondering, for anybody in the audience who is maybe anxious or hesitant to be assertive or forceful with a doctor that doesn't necessarily know how to listen or how to take them seriously, are there any signs or symptoms or any specifics that folks might be on the lookout for to know that, hey, yeah, this is definitely something your doctor should be taking more seriously and paying attention to you on?
I think one important thing is just to basically state that it is affecting your life negatively in a way that goes beyond normal. It's not a good idea to go to the doctor and say, well, I have really bad PMS and I cramp a lot, because they will not react to those statements. I was diagnosed with endometriosis after almost 10-15 years of pain and continuous visits to doctors that basically just said, oh, go home. So I know exactly what this feels like. And for a lot of these really kind of serious chronic illnesses for women, it's an average time for diagnosis between 8 and 10 years often, because women are not taken seriously and women's pain is not taken seriously. And also women don't express themselves in a good way. Sometimes they always like, yeah, no, it's not so bad, I have a PMS and it's not, no, say like, I'm in pain, I don't want to live like this, I need help, what can you do to help me? Could it potentially be endometriosis? And maybe check out the kind of illnesses it could potentially be, and just list them up, because that forces them basically to check them up and be a little bit more attentive to you, basically. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, we'll get into a little bit more of the specifics on endometriosis and endometriosis and these different things. But when we're talking about, quote unquote, regular old PMS, what actually works in seeking relief? I know we see a lot of, flash ads and different banners and different bullshit about what should be useful. But is there anything that you can tell us about the science of seeking relief in these situations?
Yeah. So, well, I don't really know what kind of commercials you get in the US, because these kind of like medicine commercials are banned here. So
Yeah, we can
they don't
advertise
disclose
that
that.
anything is medicine here. It's fine.
But yeah, so I think one thing is just basically I think the tip number one, I would say, is basically to dial down the expectations of what you want to do during the times where you're gonna have PMS. Like, for example, if you know there's gonna be 3 days a month that you're gonna feel like shit, you're gonna pick fights, and you're gonna like deal with criticism really poorly, maybe don't plan in that super important work meeting in those days if you can prevent it. Maybe don't like start a massive new project with somebody, and maybe not like plan to do this like massive major things during that time. And of course, that cannot be prevented all the time. Life
Sure.
happens. But if you can switch around a little bit, then maybe that would be a good thing to do.
I think
Then,
it's
so I think,
worthwhile I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to
mm,
really highlight that. Like, I don't want to create this world where we're telling folks who menstruate that they can't function or that they can't participate during a certain period in their cycle or whatever else. But I do want to really highlight and echo this idea that we get to listen to our bodies, that there's
yeah.
value in paying attention to those things and being willing to, I guess, respond or react to our body's own desires.
Yeah, and then also the fact is that it's maybe 3 days out of an entire bloody month. Ha, pun intended. But it's you might actually have almost superhuman powers right before your ovulation. Some people are in pain then as well, but it varies. I am super productive certain times of the month, probably a lot more productive, yeah, than the average person. But then I suck a little bit 3 days of the month, which is kind of fine because it averages out pretty cool. But if I'm forced to continuously force myself through a lot of pain and force myself through a lot, then of course my long-term production goes down because I don't listen to my body.
Mm.
And then another thing is just try to eat well, like as healthy as you can, and take ibuprofen. It's just like just some anti-inflammatory painkillers or whatever painkiller that works for you if you have like stomach problems or whatnot. We all know like what kind of painkillers that works well for us. Stay away from the opioids. Nobody needs that for period pains.
Yeah, are there any, I know there's so much kind of bullshit folk wisdom and things like that. Are there any healthy or unhealthy habits that you feel like are valid and worth considering here?
Yeah, I think of course, like just taking care of yourself and not stressing and trying to sleep when you can. And yeah, I think a lot of people like heating pads on the stomach to just relax the cramps a bit. It doesn't work for me at all, but I know it works for some people. Some people use
Works for
this
some.
yeah, some use this tense devices that basically have some sort of electricity into to the muscles in order to relax them. Doesn't work for me. It works for some. I mean, there's a lot of things like that. What you should never do is start doing some sort of vaginal douching or whatever it's called. This is like completely crazy thing that I think is much more common in the US than here, because it really upsets the sort of vaginal flora, and it's just not good. We're pretty like it's a pretty cool self-cleaning system. So and you shouldn't mess with that.
So we can, everybody listening can go ahead and throw out like their Summer's Eve and all of these like different products marketed to make sure that your vagina has a nice fresh scent or anything
Yeah.
along those lines. Is that fair or is that too far?
I think that's pretty fair. I saw some like abominable product that basically like you shoved up some glitter up your vagina, and then it was like this is like there was like glitter coming out. So I'm like, okay, this is just so fucking weird. Sorry, am I allowed to swear on this?
Yes.
Please do. Yeah.
Okay,
Fuck
it's
yeah.
so fucking weird, and it's probably not very good to have a lot of like little plastic particles stuck up your vagina. Vajayjay, that's how
Hey.
we say it in the US, right?
Some people will bedazzle anything if you give them the opportunity. Doesn't mean you
Yeah.
should, but yeah.
No.
So let me ask you, going off script a little bit here. I'm not sure if you mentioned diet yet. Is there anything that a person can do when they're on their period or having PMS symptoms as far as diet goes?
I think there's a lot, but I think you need to like check what works with you for
Mm.
you. I know there's this anti-inflammatory diet out there that basically just to me looks like just sensible eating. Just eat your vegetables, eat your like full grain foods, and reduce your meat consumption a bit, but don't stop eating meat maybe. So I think just eat reasonably well, healthy, and the plate model. But I think there's a lot of people get very bloated. That's a very common like PMS symptom as well, that you get very, very bloated stomach. You feel like your pants are like sitting like 2 sizes too tight around the stomach. And this is also like one of the things with endometriosis, that this can happen throughout the month and not just during PMS. But so some foods, if you're like super sensitive to certain foods, you're probably going to react much more stronger. Like, for example, if you eat like onion soup with garlic bread, you're probably going to have like a bit of a thing.
It's gonna be a bad time, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Cool. Any other pro tips that you have as far as managing those symptoms before we move on to callers here?
Well, no, I think for me it's basically just like ibuprofen and rest and stress less. That's been like the key things for me over the years. But yeah,
that stress is a big one. Like adding stress to any medical anything, even if it's just a normal monthly occurrence, adding stress on top of that will always make it worse.
Yep.
All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into callers here. We have Janice waiting on the line.
All right, bring it on.
Janice, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. I actually have 2 unrelated questions. The first one is
go right
probably
ahead.
more in the wheelhouse. So the first one is probably more in the wheelhouse of the guest star than the second one. Where does squirting come from? If there's any kind of consensus on that, is it from the bladder? Is it from somewhere else?
Okay. Should I go?
Please do.
Should I
Go right ahead.
I'm
Okay.
fascinated. I've heard every side of this debate, and I'd love to hear what you've got to say. Jump in.
I think is both things are true. So there is a little way that women can squirt, but it's just such a minute volume. This little gland that apparently can release some liquid, but I think if you're really wet anyway, I don't really think you notice a massive difference. But the sort of massive squirting is definitely urine related. When it's kind of squirts like half a meter away. The reason why I know this very well is because I used to have very like problems with squirting. This is like going into really detail, but it's kind of interesting from the scientific perspective, because when I removed my uterus and my bladder was less pressured and moved, it stopped. So it is completely 100% bladder related, after having this interesting scientific study done on myself. but I know it also from a lot of other literature. So both are true. There is a small gland that can release a tiny amount of some sort of like viscous liquid, but then there's like big squirting is urine.
Yeah, and I think anecdotally, just most any porn star that you talk to about the subject will back that up pretty much 100%. There's a lot of internet chatter about it, but I feel like the science is fairly settled here.
Yeah, there's a lot of men have had a lot of opinions on this. It is not urine, because if it were urine, I'd be like into like wet play, and they never want to admit to anything like that.
They try to retcon. They try to retcon the definition, whereas in actuality, they are into it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, just one quick test. Try to masturbate with an extremely full bladder and see what happens.
There you go.
Put down a rubber sheet if you need to, but have fun. Have fun. I mean, enjoy yourself. It's your body.
Yeah.
Enjoy. And Janice, you said you had another question.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I've squirted with both a full and a very recently emptied bladder, but it definitely smells different. So I knew there was a urine component at the very least. So the other question that's not biological is about sourcing ethical porn, stuff where the consumer can be confident that it's not been recorded clandestinely and that the performers are being paid well, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are several really good sites for that. My ex-girlfriend was actually...
All right, we work on getting Dr. Anna back. Sorry to say, I was. Oh,
there she is.
Oh, yep.
And
We just lost you
hopefully
for
I'm
a
back.
sec.
Okay.
You're back now.
So just
You were
wanted to
telling us
mention.
a partner of yours worked in
Yeah.
ethical porn creation, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So there are several good sites. I think they're like the Suicide Girls and God's Girls. I think, if I remember correctly, are like pretty okay with that. But there are several sites out there that basically are ethical porn or like body positive porn as well, and such. So it's
Yeah.
definitely sites out there, and we can actually follow the creators and support them directly and such. So yeah, it's out there.
Yeah, I
That's a
love
big
the
one in
advent
my
of
opinion.
OnlyFans and things. Martin, go right ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, that's a big one is body positive porn, because I know, when I was a budding young gay man, and now I'm a slightly older young gay man, yeah, it kind of warped my perception of what I was gonna encounter. And then when I actually did encounter it, I was like, oh, you don't look like the perfect Adonis that was on the screen. What's going on here? But yeah, body positivity is a huge component, I think, as far as like making porn ethically. I won't claim to consume porn ethically, but I'm always open to learning how to do so in a better way.
Yeah, it's tricky territory in a lot of ways. The big picture solution, right, is legalization and management that makes sense, and that isn't wrapped around these kind of bullshit QAnon adjacent ideas of solving problems around sex trafficking and these other issues by basically driving all sex underground and these different things. So there's obviously a lot of problems that we've talked about on this show before with FOSTA, SESTA, and a number of other aspects of the way we legislate this. But Janice, the best advice that I can give you beyond, some of the websites Dr. Anna mentioned, or things like Erica Lust Work and Lust Productions and things like that, would be to check out a great book by Dr. David Ley, who we actually had on the show a while back, called Ethical Porn for Dicks, a Gentleman's Guide to Responsible Viewing, which I think is just one of the greatest titles to a book ever created. So let me point you in that direction. But the basic policy or philosophy to be mindful here is to be paying for your porn. That's not to say that the fact that you're spending money automatically means that you are not going to run into any ethical snares or issues. There are absolutely gigantic porn sites that have really meaningful issues in the way that they, in just their labor management and the way they treat their performers. That being said, if you are spending money and contributing to the economy of porn, you are, in the vast majority of cases, on the side of the good. When you are consuming exclusively free porn, particularly free porn that is highlighting very young or teenage performers, or performers that are in these sort of like natural or amateur type settings, the likelihood of you participating in something that is clandestine and harmful dramatically increases. So I really want to encourage everybody to be mindful about paying for their porn, to look at where that money is going. Things like OnlyFans, as much as OnlyFans itself is kind of a problematic player, if the money is going directly to, or largely directly to, the performers, it's probably a fairly good setup. And better than OnlyFans are sites like I Want Clips, or there's a handful of great clips for sale. IWantClips.com. These kinds of different things can be a much better avenue for making sure that you are being a responsible consumer and not contributing to the issues that all of these bullshit laws that get in our way are meant to be preventing.
Thank you so
Dennis,
much.
do you have any? Yeah, I was going to say, do you have any other questions for us at this point, or anything that you want to share as far as your encounters with ethical pornography?
So far, I've just been consuming free, so I need to stop that and find some good sites for pay for porn.
Yeah, and there
Yeah.
are responsible free porn communities out there. Fosta Sesta really destroyed a lot of them. But there are situations where by being a little bit more mindful, a little bit more intentional, you can navigate around a lot of those concerns. But yeah, the bottom line of it is that you need to be paying for your porn because it's a product and we don't get a lot of things for free unless it's at somebody else's expense.
Great point.
That's a really good point, Christy. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to include links to Dr. Lay's book as well as some other resources in the footnotes for this episode. So if you're jogging through the park and didn't catch that book title and it isn't somehow stuck in your head, that's again Ethical Porn for Dicks: A Gentleman's Guide to Responsible Viewing Pleasure, and I'll have that included in the notes.
Thanks so much for calling in, Janice.
Or all of you. Yeah, great.
All right. Have a good one. All right. Well, that was a cool little subtopic there. That's not something that we, I think that I've heard discussed on the show before. At least maybe not in a while.
Yeah, I kind of kick myself sometimes because we did have a interview with Dr. David Lay, who is big time now. I saw him like 2 weeks ago doing Trevor Noah's show, and he's doing all of these big things, and it's always about either masturbation and like sex addiction type things or around ethical porn consumption. And I was the nerd that wanted to talk to him about a completely different subject and like the topic of his first book. I still kick myself. I think we need to have him back to go over some of these other things. But his book in particular is really excellent.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. So it looks like we're screening a couple more calls right now. We do still have lines open, folks. So if anybody's on the fence about calling in and you're watching and you're like, oh, I don't know if they want to hear my question, we do. Please give us a call. We have call screeners waiting. We have lines open. We're happy to talk to you. So go ahead and give us a call.
All right. Well, while people are going through the screening process, let's jump back into the interview if we can. Dr. Ann, I'd love to understand, I think you maybe said before the show or even as we were talking, just how common endometriosis is. And I'd really love to highlight that because I was a little bit surprised myself how many folks have this and how is it different and similar, at least in terms of symptomology, from more typical period pains.
Yeah, so often it starts with just increasing period pain. So if you okay, let's rewind. I got my period the first time. I'm a menarche when I was about 10 years old, and I had excruciating pains and problems with this already from the beginning. I was bleeding a lot and had a lot of issues. It wasn't acknowledged as a problem until I was 25, and this is where I got my diagnosis. But before I had my emergency surgery, I went through a period of like rapid decline. So if you notice, this is why I also think that you should have a diary where you actually add your period symptoms in. There are great apps for that you can use to track that. Also like mood swings and skin and whatever else that is affected by these hormones. But if you experience huge differences, like for example 1 year ago you didn't have as much pain as you have now, or 1 year ago you were not as tired and didn't bleed as much as you do now, then you should definitely seek help. And you should definitely mention the word endometriosis to the gynecologist, because believe it or not, there's a lot of gynecologists that still do not really have endometriosis close to their minds. So it's something that is often forgotten. And often they look at you with just an ultrasound and they think they can diagnose endometriosis with just using an ultrasound, which is not the case, because there is a lot of big cysts you can have that, okay, they're not maybe not this big, but they're like they can be. But any cyst over like 5 centimeters in diameter is removed surgically here, or advised to remove surgically here in Germany. So these cysts are of course visible over an ultrasound that they can do with internal ultrasound or external. But there's a lot of like kind of endometriosis tissue that can grow into your stomach, and there's a lot of like scarring tissue that can form as well that can cause extreme pain. So what happened, for example, for me was that I had they look like small little dots, little dark brown dots. This is why they're called chocolate cysts. They're like pin needle size kind of, but like loads of them. So this is why they go in and remove them with like laser surgery and such. But the scarring and the you can have a lot of tissue forming between the different endometriosis patches, basically. So what happened with me was that when they opened me up, after having told me for 15 years that I was fine, my uterus had fused with my intestine. My stomach wall, basically, like nothing was moving freely in the stomach anymore. So everything was just like logged together in a block. So when I had, for example, like a large bowel movement, I was in excruciating pain because my whole like uterus and my ovaries and everything was just pulled in one direction. And you can imagine, like, yeah, if you've ever had like eaten a really, really bad meal and been out like shitting your guts out an entire night, you know what pains there can be like when gas passes through your intestines. It can be excruciatingly painful. So like imagine having that kind of like intestinal pain every single time, like every day, basically, as soon as you ate something or like etc. So these are basically very, very clear symptoms of endometriosis. But yeah, if something changes, go see a doctor. And if you start bleeding loads, go see a doctor, and don't leave the office until you get help.
Yeah, well, and how common is endometriosis specifically?
1 in 10 women get endometriosis at some point in their lives. For some, it just sort of like happens, and they get a little bit of like a bit of issues, and then it just sort of like goes away, and they it goes into remission or something like that, and they don't really get any sort of massive problems with it.
Hmm.
But for others, they need multiple surgeries. I've had 6 surgeries now, for example.
Wow.
Starting to get like really pretty scarred, and you get problems then with the scar tissue from the surgery. So it's a little bit of a vicious cycle you get into. But yeah, the first surgery was God sent, if you excuse the expression.
Yeah, no,
Um,
that's fair. I mean, anything that describes relief from something
mm,
that is such a incredible struggle.
mm.
Can you tell us? I guess I know you touched on this in talking about your own experience, but can you give us just a broad breakdown, I guess, of what is going on internally when we're talking about endometriosis?
So it's basically endometrial-like tissue. So I know a lot of articles say it's endometrium tissue, which is basically the inner lining of the uterus that escapes the fallopian tube, basically, and enters into the stomach cavity and then implant themselves in different places. Often it's like one place that's very common is in around the ovaries, on the outside of the uterus, fossa de glace, which is like the part between like uterus and your thick intestine, which is why you can get really, really severe pains like when taking dumps, and also like anal sex can be very problematic and such. um and then they can also attach itself to lungs, to liver, to, you can basically have it anywhere in the stomach. It is not very, very common to have. It's very rare actually to have it on the lungs, but there are cases where this has happened. And there is one theory about retrograde menstruation, that they think that basically the period is not emptied out through the vagina, but actually and like blowing like into the stomach cavity. So that is one theory, but there has been a lot of research lately that is questioning a little bit the validity of that. There's also like seems to be like an immune system component where I think it's like which immune cells is it now? Like I got like a blank. I think it's the T cells. Is it? Like I always mix them up. Anyway, so they basically don't recognize this as foreign tissue. Where it's not foreign because it is your own body, but it doesn't recognize these cells as okay. These buggers shouldn't be here, so let's smash them. But they basically leave them there. And for women who basically don't get endometriosis, maybe these cells basically are recognized and then quickly removed. So, but we don't know. There's so little research on endometriosis, which is frankly ridiculous. Considering that 1 in 10 women will suffer from this at some point. Is one of the most common reasons for infertility in women. It means millions of women, like around the world, suffer from endometriosis and severe pains. It's kind of if you just look at it from a socioeconomic perspective, the number of like working days that are lost and the workforce that is lost basically because women these women have such pain or health issues, it's kind of staggering. So to see how little research that has been done, it's I think it's one word for it is shameful. It's really, really shameful. So I just want to put it in context as well. If I were a man and went to the doctor and said, "Oh, listen, I've got such a bad pain in my cock that I can't have sex, and this has been going on for 10 years." Hey, what the fuck? Yeah, go home and drink some chamomile tea. Would that be the response? I doubt it.
Try to be less
highly.
stressed, get more
It's
rest,
like-
stay home
exactly.
more.
Are
Yeah.
you a bit tense?
Yeah.
It's like, and the first question is always like, do you have a lot of stress? I'm like, yeah, of course I have a lot of stress. Who doesn't? But it's been going on for 10 years now. I can't be stressed every single bloody day.
No, that's a fair point, and really the reason that this episode is worth doing in my mind. I mean, I think that a lot of the things that we're covering is kind of second nature or readily understood by a lot of the folks who are listening. But the fact that the other half maybe have no idea about some of these things or are hearing some of these words for the very first time is concerning, because these are incredibly common medical issues that are our purity culture and our discomfort and our patriarchy have kept us from ever putting the appropriate effort into addressing.
Yeah.
So thank you for walking us through endometriosis. Can you explain to us how adenomyosis is different still, and also maybe help me with pronouncing that on air live in front of folks to just prove my point of how little attention these things get and how unprepared we can be around them.
So it's adenomyosis, and adenomyosis is a disease that is separate from endometriosis. Sorry. Often you hear doctors say, well, okay, you do hysterectomy, you remove your uterus basically, which is kind of a massive surgery. I've had it. And then basically your endometriosis will go away. Well, I'm always starting to think like, do you... Where do you get your medical degree? Because I mean, if the endometriosis is located on the intestines or on your kidneys, like my bladder, I've had like several bladder surgeries because I have a lot of endometriosis on my bladder. Why would removing my uterus remove my endometriosis on the bladder? It just keeps scratching my head. But I think adenomyosis is an illness that is basically sitting in the uterus only, and most of my pain was due to the adenomyosis. So this basically like kind of like similar tissue to the endometriosis that is basically growing into sort of little lumps in the in the uterus. And for me, removing the uterus actually removed a lot of my pain, and the fatigue was improved as well. So, but that doesn't make the statement true that a hysterectomy will cure endometriosis, because that is complete fucking bullshit. It depends on where it's sitting, where your pain is originating, and if you might suffer from a lot of adenomyosis, which is an even more silent disease than endometriosis. Most doctors, they're like, yeah, adenomyosis there's no problem at all. You have loads of it, like your whole uterus is full with it, but it can't give you any pain. I'm like, well, who the fuck, what, how do you know? Like, obviously there's no research around it, and you just keep telling all women this and just assuming that you're right. So I think it's important to recognize the difference between these two illnesses. And it's also important to understand this if you are thinking about a hysterectomy, and because it is a massive surgery that can lead to a lot of other side effects. It was a good decision for me, but it has led to a lot of other things like prolapses and things. So learn about the stuff before you make the decision.
Right?
Oh my God, I sound so angry all the time.
I mean, we brought you in for an angering topic. And I'm going to mention, Martin, I think maybe you've got yourself muted there.
I was muted. Yeah. No, I was just going to say learning is important, taking as much information as you can, especially when it comes to complicated medical stuff. Always get another doctor's opinion is my best practice, but yeah, just make sure you take in all the info.
Fair to say.
So let me ask you, Dr. Anna, so as far as impacting like day-to-day safety, comfort, sexuality, all those kind of feelings that we have, how does this affect that? How does endometriosis affect that?
Well, it affects your whole life. When you are like bleeding loads, the fact that you risk anemia, you might not want to go out because you are worried that you're going to bleed through. Now we're talking about like tampons and extra pads and everything just bleeds through anyway. But that wasn't the main issue for me. The main issue was for me the pain, and just having this issue where like I've been doubling down with pain at work, or like just kipping over and just not being able to stand up. And the thing is, like, there's nothing like I can do. Like laying down doesn't help. Just moving around does help, but sometimes it's hard to even move because you just get into this like dead beetle kind of position, and you can't move because it's so painful. And then also I know that in 5 or 10 minutes, the sort of pain attack can be reduced to a level where I can function again. And you really learn to function with high levels of pain continuously in your system. And which makes you probably, when you are feeling a little bit extra down, it makes you very irritable as well, and maybe not as stress tolerant as other people would be, because you are buffering literal like physical hell on the inside all the
Right.
time. And also worry about like like bathroom stuff and yeah, just general like not, and also the pain during sex is like one of those things with endometriosis. Don't ever let anyone tell you that painful sex is something you need to accept because you're a woman. Never ever let anyone tell you that. It's just something that I've heard so many times, and it literally ruins lives. And you should never accept that.
Yeah, if you're not enjoying it, I mean, that's, for me, that's part of, what is it? The full phrase is informed, enthusiastic consent. That's the enthusiastic part. You're supposed to be having fun. If it's painful, that's no good.
Yeah.
And then what kind of solutions exist? I know we touched on surgery, which works for some people, but what other solutions are there out there if that's not a viable option?
Well, there are just basically very shitty solutions out there. Surgery is like a sledgehammer to to a fragile problem.
Right.
The other solutions, or it's not solutions, are hormonal therapies, and they basically wanted to put me on really high level progesterone, which made me extremely depressed, and I felt terrible on it. So instead of like having pain every second day, I was just feeling like borderline suicidal every day, which meant that
yeah, that's not good.
and the pain didn't completely go away either. So I opted for like not using progesterone. And then I need to say there are some women who can take progesterone and it works great for them. They don't feel this like mental effects of it at all. So this is by no means a sort of like painting progesterone black in any way, because I've met a lot of women who've had like good success with that. So, and I think the main thing about taking progesterone is that you will often stop menstruating. So a lot of the issues with heavy bleedings and such will basically be reduced. It's not a treatment; it's just basically a plaster on a gaping wound, but is what medical science has been able to produce. There are some other options, like I know there's a rather new thing called Visan, but I had severe side effects of that as well. You should also not take it for more than 1 year, because then you can get a bit of issues. I couldn't take that either. And then there are other medications as well that would basically put you into a chemical menopause. And with the osteoporosis and all these other things that means, and the very, very heavy effects on your mood and your personality. So but if you're desperate enough, and if you're in enough pain, a lot of women opt for this. They get injections of this as well. And then there's one, like in extreme cases, there's also testosterone that is given, but often that leads to like irreversible changes to your voice, and you might get, personality changes as well. So it's often not. It's often like very like last resort, if I say
Sure.
that. But there's no treatment. There's no real good medications. There's like there isn't anything really, except for just anti-inflammatory painkillers, reducing stress, having surgery if it gets too bad, and learning more about your condition so that you can cope with life in a better way.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's sometimes what the first step is, as far as medical treatment, is just learning to cope with it. I mean, it can't it can't be easy. I'll say that much. As a non-vagina haver, it can't be easy.
I think like the greatest tragedy in my life that I wasn't born with a cock, and that does not mean that I want to become a male. I would really love to have like a female body, but just instead of this kind of like completely dysfunctional like female reproductive system, I'd have a cock. I could even stand up pissing. It'd be fantastic. It'd be such a wonderful
nice
thing. You're like that is really like if I could pick one, if there were a god, that's what I would say. Like, come on, what is this?
Just for
design?
1 day, at the very least. Yeah,
exactly. If 1 day, and what the hell is this design? This is probably the shittiest design, like engineering design, that I've ever seen in my entire life. What the fuck is up with this? That's probably what I would say.
Oh, valid questions. Valid questions.
You've got a recreation center right next to a sewage treatment center. I mean,
I know.
it's very poor planning.
It's completely
right,
poor
and
planning.
a daycare in there too.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Pregnancy. I don't know. It was a half joke. All right. Let's go ahead. I don't want to cut you off, Anna, if you don't have anything else for that portion of our interview. No, you're good. We really appreciate the insight. This is stuff that I'm not familiar with at all. So, and I'm sure our audience is in the same boat. Let's go ahead and jump back to the phones here. We're going to take some calls. I just want to talk to Brandi real quick. She wanted to continue our conversation about ethical porn, and she had some comments about porn positivity. So, Brandi, you are on with Christy, Martin, and Dr. Anna. How's it going?
It is going well. Thank you for asking. How are y'all tonight?
Good. Thanks for calling in. So what's going on?
What's on your mind?
I literally just turned on the show right before I called in, and I heard part of Dr. Anna's conversation, and it got into talking about positivity and ethics in porn. I was like, whoa, that just rung a bell with me, because I literally got out of the workforce this year during COVID, and I am frustrated to get back into the workforce as a transgender person or as a feminine person in general. And so I decided to create content, and I've always wanted to do porn, and I enjoy porn, but also the niches that transgender people have within porn community is demoralizing most times. Most of the porn, even the names are very offensive that they use as headlines for things. And I was like, I don't want to put my name out there or my character out and be part of that toxicity that systemically is running through that industry. And so I just started creating my own content. I was like, wow, I just figured out how to do this by myself, and my boyfriend helps. He does the filming and the managing, and we do all the editing, put it all together ourselves. And my main focus is to look at porn through a new lens. Let's look at it through some ethical lens. Let's look at body positivity, not just because I have a nice feminine body, because I have a body that's mine. And I don't make it the front page news that, hey, I'm also a transgender person, or I like to refer to myself as a non-cis person.
Sure.
So I make it like positivity as that's a secondary story, that it's not the front page. We're just acknowledging that my body may not be exactly like every other's body, but it's still not going to be the main story of the porn.
I mean, that's something we barely have in other forms of media. You know, it's rare to see a gay person on TV that isn't characterized as exclusively or primarily as a person who is gay. It's rarely a small part of their identity, even though, I mean, it's a meaningful part of a person's identity, but it is not the defining characteristic. And yet, when we're talking about fictional characters on television programs, it generally is the only characteristic. And so to extend that over into porn and to just increase representation is a pretty transgressive and frankly, on this internet during this economy, it's a pretty brave thing for you to be doing. And so I hope you're having tons of success.
I just started launching content a few weeks ago. I'm having fun, and it's enjoyable that I get to do it myself. And what you're saying about porn not being the front runner in our art as a society, right? Like like television's way ahead of porn as pushing our society's norms, right? But I was looking back at art in general. If we look at the evolution of art, where it starts, we see porn or we see images of the human body going back, 14,000 years, right?
Yeah, the concept of beauty. Yeah.
I'm like, so it's like, why does it have to be set in a disgraceful or any other type of mode than that? As porn, it's an art form, and we should celebrate that body, the art. So trying to do that with ethics driving, and also making normality of a body that's different. So I guess that's kind of my driving point to there.
No, I appreciate you doing this work.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in to share, Brandi. We really appreciate it. Back to that, what you said about how, it's not about what type of body you have. It's about you. I have the same thing where I always say I introduce myself as, hi, I'm Martin, not hi, I'm gay.
Sure.
It's like the identity comes before the, the identity of self, I should say, comes before, the gender identity, the sexual orientation, all of that. Those are the components of the whole, but the whole is who you are, and that may change over time. We really appreciate you calling in with your perspective on that. And I just want to wish you the best of luck in your endeavor. That sounds awesome. And it sounds like, you're turning the tide in the right direction there as far as positivity.
Well, I'm trying. I'm seeing if I can pay the bills and make my art more vivid on that stream.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Somebody's got to pay the lights.
Best of luck.
All right. Thank you, Brandi. We'll take it easy, okay? Thanks for calling.
Have a great evening.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Right. Who else you got for us tonight?
Awesome. Let's go ahead and I want to talk to let's talk to JB real quick. This may be something that you want to address as well, Christy. They're calling about people with a uterus who don't identify as a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now, JB, you are on the air.
Hi, how's everybody?
Good, good. How are you tonight?
I'm good. So yeah, I was just wondering because I'm trans and I find that I have really bad PMS and I don't know. I just whenever it comes to that time of the month, I just really get disgusted with myself in a way that I can't control. And
Sure.
I don't know if there's any advice you'd have to mitigate that.
Yeah, so as I said earlier as well in the show, there are some women who go into such a dark space, as you say, describe self-disgust, self-hatred, maybe also some people lash out and say things they might not mean, or little things might explode into massive things in a way that it causes really, really, really severe suffering. I know there are. I have read there are some people being treated with fluoxetine, small doses, and just temporarily around the PMS time. Now, if this is done where you live or in the US, or I live in Germany, Swedish by birth, so I don't really know what the suggested treatments are where you live, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not here to give any sort of medical advice in that way either, so I put a little bit of a red flag on my suggestion, but I know there are ways to treat this. There's also a name for this condition. Now, of course, I'm completely blanking because it's 3 a.m. in the morning here, and my brain is turning into some sort of soggy mush. but there is a name to the syndrome that you might be describing, and there is help to get, because that dark place can be extremely dark, and
Yeah.
you deserve to get help for it.
Sure. And I guess, JB, I want to clarify your concerns here a little bit, because my sense from what you're saying is that, yes, there are concerns specifically around the hormone swings and some of the physical discomfort around your period and things along those lines. But there's also a meaningful sense that this is not the way your body was meant to be, or that this is not connected to your identity. And this is sort of femininity forcing itself on you in some ways. Is that kind of your experience?
Yeah. I try to separate myself from it a little bit by being well, I have a period, but it's not mine, kind of. But
yeah,
it kind of helps to.
The indefinite article can really help create some separation there. And I get that. I guess I just want to acknowledge that as we're having conversations like this one, folks might often refer to these as women's issues. And aside from the fact that that's asinine, because we're all humans, we're all in this together, we just spent all of last week talking about how that type of gender critical lens that connects menstruation specifically with women not only misses out on the fact that a lot of women don't menstruate, but that a lot of folks who menstruate are not women. And I hope that we've been mindful in our language here and not kind of furthering that particular lens or stereotype. But I also want to recognize the deep cultural connections and these notions of femininity being deeply wrapped up in a particular bodily function that doesn't describe you or your experience in any kind of real way. And so,
I mean, just look at me. I don't menstruate at all. And I have for me, I identify as a woman, as female, but I have always had a very, very strong masculine side to me, and I have had when I became pregnant, it felt like my entire person was taken away from me. And I know there's a lot of like the right story that you're supposed to tell as a woman is that, oh, pregnancy, I was glowing and it was wonderful. It was hell, because I felt like my body was taken away from me. Suddenly this like sort of like puffed up femininity intruded on me. You know, I've always been like strong and athletic and powerful, and suddenly I felt like a cow. You know, like it wasn't me. It wasn't me at all. And then every single time when I got my period, I also had similar feelings of feeling almost my femininity was pushed up in my face, but it was not the femininity that I stood for. It was a different type of femininity that I couldn't really cope with it. So the day I actually removed my uterus, like firstly I got rid of a lot of pain, but I've never felt as much me as when I am now. Like, I'm a woman, but I don't have a uterus. I am not fertile at all, and I have never felt as much me as I feel now. I feel like stronger, empowered, and I feel good about it. So even though my experience is probably like a tiny like crumb of your experience, but I just want to say that I understand where these feelings can come from. I am a sort of, yeah, in some way I have experiences as well, and I think before PMS it just becomes a lot worse. Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense.
Oh, you know, unfortunately it looks like we lost our caller. Oh, and we just lost Dr. Anna.
Cool. It'll just be you and I, buddy. Oh, nope. Hey,
oh, you're back. You're back.
Okay, good.
That was just too funny. The call dropped and then you dropped, and I'm like, all right, it's the Martin and Christy show.
Cool.
All right, we have some more calls here. I just wanted to say, even though we just lost JB, thank you so much for calling in. You're just as valid as we are. We appreciate you calling in with your take on things. So let's go ahead and talk to Cameron next. Cameron has a really interesting question that I'm probably going to defer to Christy on.
Sure. What are we talking about, Cameron? What can we do for you tonight?
Hey, this is my first time calling, so I'm so glad I could get through.
Yeah, thank you.
So I have started to explore like blood play recently, and apparently there's a side to it about menstruation specifically, which to me that seems like the more vanilla side of it, but still it's interesting.
I just want to take a quick moment to recognize the 90% or the large number of folks in our audience that thought, menstruation, blood play, that's the vanilla side of things. All right, let's see where this goes.
I know it's an unusual topic.
No, I'm so glad that you brought it up with us. I'm really excited to hear the things that you've been exploring or learning about yourself.
Well, there's really not much information. Well, I've just started, but I can't find much information, at least online, about blood play. So I really wanted to call in and ask if there's like any specific safety concerns about at least menstruation anyway.
Well, firstly, blood is carrying a hell of a lot of disease vectors if you have them. So if you play around with blood, you should just be careful that you don't get things like HIV or other nasty kind of illnesses that you can get. You know how careful they are with needles in the doctor's office. They put them in a bucket and then take them away and have them incinerated. So, but if you are, if you're gonna do this, make sure that maybe if you have a partner that you're monogamous with, and you've gotten tested and such for the whole range of stuff that you could carry in your blood, then there should be not so much safety concerns, I think. But if you're doing it with people that you don't know and you pick them up somewhere, and I hang around a lot of fetish clubs here in Berlin, and that's a big part of my life. But blood play is something that I would not just jump into with anyone, and without being very knowledgeable about who they are and where they've been and what their disease status is, because of course you can cause yourself quite some damage if you're not careful.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, they call it edge play for a reason. It's something that a lot of people get training to do this.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you're using that word for the audience and recognizing that that's what this is. Edge play is great. It can be incredibly exhilarating and meaningful, but we use that word to describe anything that you want to be really careful with and take very seriously, or at the very minimum have like meaningful safety measures in place for. So this is not maybe something that you want to explore with the stranger that you meet at a bar. This is something that you want to be a little bit more mindful and intentional about, and reserve for these more controlled situations that you've put a little bit more time and effort into.
Yeah, and stay sober when you do it as well, so that you don't make any mistakes. But I mean, I've done a lot of like body suspensions as well, with hooks, and hooks through the skin, basically hanging in hooks. And the suspension teams here in Berlin, the ones that I have been having experiences with, they're extremely careful with how they work, sterile, with gloves. They have certain buckets where they put things, and make sure that the skin is clean before, so that you don't introduce any sort of pathogens into the person that you might work with. And also like needle play is also one thing. Some people really like. It's not really my cup of tea, but there's a lot of people who really like it, and like the beauty of it, and like pulling out the needles and see the blood flow down and such. And if you like that, just make sure that you're clean. Wear gloves. Wear treat it as you would in a doctor's office, unless you're really secure and safe.
Okay, I guess what I'm wondering is, because I've read books on like the vampire community, and I know that there's always going to be risks associated with drawing blood and drinking and that kind of thing. But just for like menstruation and kind of the typical acts during sex that go along with that, like it should be safer, or are there still risks?
Well, blood is blood. It doesn't matter if it comes out your vagina or through your arm. It's just the same thing.
That's true.
Yeah. So if you, for example, if you have unprotected anal sex with, which basically creates a lot of, or damages maybe to the butthole. Well, if you get like wounds there, and then the person also has, if two women having sex, and then you penetrating with a strap on or something, and one partner has the period as well, it might not be the best combination, because you have a really high risk situation where you have blood flowing and maybe some open wounds in combination. I'm just like, it was like the first situation that I came to my mind that I would think about, okay, this could be a little bit of a red warning flag. It's very rare that lesbian sex is otherwise it's much less risky, but if you're involving strap-on, it could be a little bit more risky. But I mean, menstrual blood is blood. It doesn't matter where it comes out from. It's still blood.
That's kind of the image I was thinking of, because I guess my idea right now is that a lot of people kind of take it for granted, that they see other people like doing it and they're like, oh, I want to do that too, and then they don't think about it.
Yeah, it goes trends in things, and then people stop thinking by themselves. And they move with the masses. Nobody stops and goes, hey,
funny how that goes.
Well, really, just to say, anytime we're talking about something that like pretty universally is agreed upon to fall into that category of edge play, you need to know what you're doing. Yeah. This is something that you want to be really mindful of. And so just recognizing that you can do whatever crazy consensual thing you want to do. If you're enjoying safe, sane, and consensual sexuality, go for it. Whatever you're enjoying is wonderful. But there are certain things that are a quick walk around the block and very safe and within your own neighborhood. You can get more and more majestic and more beautiful views by hiking down a deep canyon or up a really steep mountain. But if you were going to do so, you'd want to bring the right equipment, you'd want to have the right training, and you might even need to involve a Sherpa or a guide of some sort. Yeah. So, for your regular vanilla sex, have at it. be smart, know what you're doing. Even there, you want to be mindful about the basics of STIs, about birth control, about condoms, and these different things. I'm hoping that we've done a sufficient job of acknowledging all of that material on this show. But beyond that, if you want to go on a wild adventure, just make sure you're properly prepared.
That was well put.
Okay. I have to go. My blood sugar is getting low, but I want to mention one more thing that JB brought up, and that's the trans issue, because it was actually the opposite for me. Because I talked to my doctor, and I transitioned a while back. It was, identity issues. I identify as gender fluid now, but back then I actually transitioned twice. And my doctor was under the impression that it was normal for me to have like a really bad period because I was trans.
Oh, wow. That is okay. Yeah.
It was very unusual, but it was the complete opposite of JB's experience for me. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think it just highlights something that Dr. Ann has been saying all night, which is that our medical establishment is not well prepared to handle anything. Anything other than middle-aged white guys? That might be something of an exaggeration, but how much of one is it really?
I was going to say white people with penises.
Yeah.
That's what the medical industry is tuned towards.
That's true. There's one thing also we shouldn't forget, and that is there's one thing of being reminded of your period and maybe your femininity and getting a little bit upset about that. But then there's actually and this is very, very important to remember. There's actually the medical syndrome that, of course, now I've forgotten the name of, where you basically the hormonal changes before your period will literally make you you feel. You end up in a very, very dark place. And this is hormonal. This is not like, oh, I'm getting a little bit annoyed that my body is changing, but it's actually physical, hormonal. It's not your mind doing things in that way. So I think it's important to understand that it can be like a feedback loop of you having this dysmenorrhea and this particular like syndrome where you basically get really, really, really dark before your period, and that in combination with the transition where you might get reminded of your femininity it can worsen the whole. You get into like a weird feedback loop. But I think it's very, very important to really say, okay, it's not just in your head. It's like can be literally physical, and that is very important to underline, I think.
Hey, Cameron, I just want to say thank you again for calling in. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the calls now and move on to the interview section. But thank you again for calling and sharing your thoughts with us. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Have a nice night.
You too.
Hey,
thank
appreciate you.
All right.
Well, Dr. Ann, I know that we touched on this a little bit, but there's clearly a lot of stigma and discomfort in talking about these things, and that's leading to poor research. That's leading to poorly informed doctors. But what kind of global problems can we really see coming out of the discomfort that people experience around these topics or the stigma around these issues?
Well, great part of humanity is in perpetual pain. That is kind of like a big thing, right? So that is one thing, but also the fact is that not recognizing these actual physical issues that you can have like before and during a period or like during ovulation. I mean that can lead to a lot of people feeling very isolated and not understanding what's going on with them, and self-hatred and very dark thoughts. And just understanding that certain things are normal in a certain scope, and you're not alone, and then some things are not normal and you should get help by them. Just getting a little bit more knowledge around that would, I think, ease so many minds out there. And I'm not talking about just the women here. I'm talking about or like anyone that suffers from PMS. I should have been more inclusive in my statement, but it involves all their partners as well that might not have sort of experiences with uteri. Uteruses, that was like really really a weird thing to say. So I think just this understanding between partners as well about when sex drive is high, when it's lower, and not having like unrealistic expectations of each other, and being a little bit more chill about, okay, so now it's like these days, so I might be a little bit more irritable and a bit more down, and then I might be completely horny another part of the month. Just having that knowledge and acknowledging that. I know that most partners, they do that, but having a little bit more of an open conversation could potentially also avoid a lot of conflicts at home, and particularly when it comes to painful sex, when it comes to just pain, background pain in general, to be able to communicate that and not just immediately be labeled a hysterical woman as soon as you're in pain, or it can't be that bad. I don't know how many times I've heard somebody telling me, a medical doctor telling me, it can't be that bad. What do you mean it can't? And how do you know? Right? And I'm pretty pain tolerant. I've been, whipped a fair few times. I have hanged myself in hooks and literally through my own skin. I am not a super pain sensitive person, and if I can faint from that pain, it is kind of bad. So but of course I'm a weak, feeble, hysterical woman coming to complain about it. So
clearly,
so these are the things. It would help so many people if we were just more open about it, if more research was done, and if you could talk to a partner a bit better. It's hard. I've had problems communicating with my partners as well, that I'm in pain, because it's felt like I was not a real woman. I was defect somehow. So I don't know how many times in my life I've had pain, like sex and then excruciating pain at the same time, pretending I was fine, which has led to kind of a trauma thing as well, where I had problems, getting orgasm, and then I managed to sort that out. But it was like a lot of things that happens when you start having a lot of sex, when it's really really painful. You lose your sex drive. There's a whole like rat tail of issues that will come marching in, and these issues can in turn like really mess up with your relationship, because the person that you love or that you want to be with, and try to make them understand that the reason why you don't want to have sex is because you're in pain, and then also have that playfulness, which I have not allowed my partners. I had been in too much pain to allow for playfulness, and I wouldn't even let them poke around in me, because I had too much experiences with people who like poked around too hard or wrong, and I never felt like I was in the driver's seat and could tell them stop poking around so hard. So it was just a big clusterfuck, basically, and in a bad way, right? So I think it's so important to talk about these things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you highlighting all of that. I wondered if this was going to come up on air, but I just last night was making drinks for my partner and I had some random ingredients, and I thought, yeah, I'll give this a try. And I mixed together just sort of a random cocktail using whatever I had laying around. And I went to hand it to my partner, and I thought to myself, don't say that, don't say that, don't say that, don't say that. And she goes, what are you calling this? And I was like, the period blood. That was the thing I was trying not to say. Sorry, didn't mean to put you off your appetite. My mistake. And her immediate response was, that's not what period blood looks like. It's the wrong color. And I immediately point out to her, I was like, no, I'm not talking about the color. I was talking about the jam that was floating at the bottom. That's a little bit chunky. It's got just that right texture. And she started laughing, and she was honestly, I think, surprised, because even though I'm this guy, like I do this show, if you know nothing else about me, you know that I talk about sex in front of an audience for hours every week. And even still, I think she was a little bit surprised that me, as a cis male, had any like understanding or acknowledgement of that aspect of menstruation. And just
part.
yeah, well, just highlighting the fact that so many guys, I'm confident there are guys that are listening to this right now going, what is he talking about? Just the fact that we are so unaware or so disconnected, and that we've done so much to like shield men from ever having to participate or understand or believe women's experiences around menstruation is just baffling and frankly very upsetting to me. So I'll get off my soapbox and let Martin take over from here. But it's just bizarre that that we are so unwilling to talk about something that's such a common and basic part of life for such a large number of humans.
Yeah.
Roughly half, right? Give or take.
Yeah, more or less.
Give or take a few million.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Dr. Anna, how can we develop better understanding and compassion around these concerns without dipping into the territory of like, somebody's PMSing? You know, we don't want to trivialize these things because they're valid medical concerns. So, how can we approach that?
I think, talking about it, I think is super important, and and also like. Maybe not always take it so super seriously. Also, like it's fun. It's also okay to make jokes about it and then have fun. But having like walking up to somebody who's really suffering and going like, "Oh, do you have PMS?" That is like punchable, I think.
Fair to say.
Yeah. No,
because,
that's definitely not something you'd say to a stranger.
No.
Or just a casual acquaintance or anything.
No, but even at home, I mean, it's like it's kind of it has become such a downgraded comment of like, okay, you're being hysterical, so I should not take what you're saying seriously now. Instead of maybe treating it as something that is like as a physical condition, and just treat it as such, and don't poke around in it if that person is suffering. Maybe have a little bit more of an tolerance for things as well during those days. But I think just talking about it is the key, I think. Raising awareness. Yeah.
Well, fair to say. And I'm going to let Martin kind of wrap us up for the night here in just a moment. But I guess outside of that idea of we should be talking about these things, we should be taking them seriously and making them a more regular part of life, I'm curious if there are any other sort of hopeful takeaways you have for everybody watching tonight, or any little differences that any of us can hope to make on these issues.
I think one thing that I would like to mention is that endometriosis centers are popping up a little bit here or there in Europe. I don't know about the US, but the issue is taken much more seriously now. I remember back in 2008, I think it was, the recently opened endometriosis center in Uppsala in Sweden was, it's just the fact that, there's a whole country and there's one center for endometriosis back then. It's kind of crazy for an entire country of like 10 million people. But there are more and more, and there are more doctors being focused on these issues. So that's great. That's really great. And other than that, I think that enter the be a little bit careful with the patient groups if you have endometriosis, because then you might actually you can get really depressed, and you can get really focused on starting using the illness as an identity, which might not be what you want to do. But join these discussion groups. There are some really good ones around there. And raise awareness. Just I think that is basically the big takeaway.
Fair to say.
Awareness is key. Absolutely. All right. Well, we had an awesome show tonight. It was my pleasure to be here in a live show at the ACA for the first time. Dr. Anna, you've been an amazing guest. I know I learned a lot from you that I never would have learned otherwise. I hope our audience did as well. I'm confident they did based on the calls we got. Let's go ahead and take a look at Dr. Anna. Where can we find you?
So
some links for you.
Yeah, so my platform is called Dr. Anna's Imaginarium, and the website here, anna'imaginarium.com, is going to my consulting page, but from the top there you can get to Dr. Anna's Imaginarium, which is kind of the science communication part. The platform on Facebook is also Dr. Anna's Imaginarium. It's got almost 100,000 followers now, and I have a Discord server where we discuss. Because the thing I have is my focus is science and kink, but because Facebook is very Puritan, I can't do much kink. So most of it is just science.
Right.
So this is why I moved the kink to I can't use Instagram either. So I moved it to Discord, and a Telegram I use moderately a lot, but Discord, the Discord server is pretty cool. We have a lot of channels there where we discuss mental health, eating disorders, science questions, physics, and whatever. And we have a fetish and BDSM channel as well, where there's a lot of fun stuff being posted. But the great thing is I'm developing an app, and so I'm gonna release an app that will be available on both iStore and Google Play and whatnot. That will basically lead to Dr. Anna's community, which is going to be truly science and kink, where there will be groups where you can discuss this wonderful marriage of these two very strange combination. But anyway, so it will be released, I think, in a month or so. So keep your eyes open for that.
Yeah, we will definitely be looking forward to that. Is there have y'all settled on a name? What might people be searching for? I'll make sure to drop it on air once y'all get it out into the world.
Okay, so Dr. Anna's Imaginarium.
Okay.
Yeah, so Dr. Anna's Imaginarium, you can find me on most things. But as I said, the web page now, the Dr. Anna's Imaginarium, the community is extremely slow as a web page because it's still in kind of development. So don't get too angry with me if the site is super slow. You can still sign up now. It doesn't cost anything, and the app will go live in about a month, and it will be much faster. So.
Okay, well, awesome. We'll keep an eye out for that. I think we're definitely going to need to have you back on once you've got that up and running, because an app that explores kink and science is basically why Secular Sexuality is here. That is just fantastic content. I'm excited to see it.
Cool.
Absolutely. No, I like how you explained that, how, all the science happens on Facebook because they don't allow the kink, and then the kinkiness happens on the Discord. All right. Well, I'll be sure to go check out the Discord server for sure. Okay. So you can find us on Facebook here at Secular Sexuality. It's facebook.com/groups/secularsexfg. That is our fan group, by the fans for the fans. You can also leave us a voicemail. Go ahead and give us a call at 512-666-0275. That's 512-666-0ASK. And go ahead and leave us a voicemail, and we'll do a mailbag episode every so often and get back to you on those. As far as merch, we have some awesome Secular Sexuality merch. You can shop for that at bit.ly/AEN merch. That's AEN merch. You can get a nice t-shirt, get a sticker, get a mug. I saw a pillow up there. I wouldn't mind having a sexy pillow, to be honest. And last but not least here, we got to go ahead and thank our awesome crew. And I need to say an extra special thank you because the gentleman in the bottom panel there, Mr. Vern Grainer, trained me on how to do audio, which got me in the seat that I'm in right now. So we're a pretty open community here. We always need more volunteers, and we'd love to see your face up there. So if you see on Facebook that we're looking for volunteers to help crew the shows, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, please do. We've got an incredible community. So whether it's through our Facebook group or any of these other platforms that allow us to connect during this weird time, which I want to just continue to highlight and point out, this is not normal life. This is not the way our society was built to function. So if there's a little bit of grinding in the gears, that makes sense, and it's something to not ignore or dismiss. And if you can grease those gears a little bit by participating in our Discord server or our Facebook conversations, watching the show live and participating in the live chat and all of these different things to scratch some of those itches, we really hope that you'll do so and that you'll participate in the community part of the Atheist Community of Austin. With that said, I'm incredibly grateful to you, Dr. Anna, for being here tonight and for walking us through all these things. Certainly want to have you back to talk about your app and a number of other topics that I'm sure we could explore together.
Thank you. It was really, really interesting and great to be here. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Anna.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And Martin, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm grateful to have you here jumping in for your first time on this side of the microphone. And if you're up for it, why don't you go ahead and take us out?
Yeah. So, oh gosh, what's the line? Something about orgasms. I hear it every week.
Right?
I'll let you say it, Christy.
Yeah, sure. Well, really, however you do it, we just want to take a moment here to remind everybody to go out and give themselves a big old orgasm. Or, better yet, give somebody else one.
Give somebody else one.